Welcome to Stuff You Should Know About IP, the podcast where we dive into the wild world of intellectual property. I'm your host, Ray Guarneri, a self-proclaimed expert in the field of IP entertainment. But enough about me. Let's talk about someone who's actually accomplished something impressive. Yusuf Dikec, the Olympic shooter who's trying to trademark his signature shooting stance. Because why not? If you're going to be a world-class athlete, you might as well own the rights to your own awkward pose. In this episode, we'll explore the ins and outs of trademark law and whether Yusuf's stance is protectable. Will he succeed in his quest for intellectual property dominance? Stay tuned for lots of shooting puns, and maybe, just maybe, you'll learn something about IP along the way. Stuff You Should Know About IP is the only purely AI-generated podcast about intellectual property on the internet. If you enjoy listening to us muse about IP and watching the random outputs of Chat GPT read aloud by humans on a Teams recording, don't forget to click the like button, share with a colleague, and leave a comment wherever you're listening. Today's episode of Stuff You Should Know About IP is brought to you by the Trademark Lawyer magazine. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on in the world of IP and trademarks, go to www.trademarklawyermagazine.com. Each issue is free to read for up to 8 weeks. That's trademarklawyermagazine.com for global news in the world of trademarks. Okay. Daniel,
Ray, great intro, Ray. Great intro.
Today is not possibly. It is the biggest day for the Stuff You Should Know About IP podcast because we have Daniel Ovadia with us as a guest.
Wait, that's the first time I've ever heard you just say Daniel Ovadia. Usually people preface that with the great Daniel Ovadia.
I'm so sorry, Ray. Daniel. Please forgive me.
Wait, let me tell you how great Daniel Ovadia is, okay? Let me just give him a little bit of puffing, okay? Daniel Ovadia has broken the record at Executive IP. We brought Daniel in from Munich to shoot videos in the German language. Daniel shot 59 videos in 2.5 days. That has never happened before. I mean, I've been doing this for like a decade, and I think the most I've ever done in 2.5 days is like 35. So Daniel is truly the great, especially when he's on camera. As you can see, look at him. He looks like George Clooney, even better. He's better looking than George Clooney. So anyway, Ray, the only thing I dispute about your intro is Yusuf's stance did not look awkward to me. It looked pretty cool. It had like a James Bond kind of look to it, right? So,
well, if Daniel, you want to see an awkward stance, just look at some of the who was that other shooter at the Olympics? I don't know if I'll look it up while you guys are introducing the topic. But there was some guy who he was like this, practically with his hand behind his head.
Was he effective? Right?
He's an Olympic shooter, so he's better than all of us.
So he might look awkward, but he's clearly not awkward.
Right, and then you got
but he's nowhere. But he's not as cool as Yusuf, right? Nobody's that cool. But Daniel, since you were the one that gave us the topic, you sent us an email saying, hey, we should do a podcast on this. We thought we'd bring you in to join us and give us the background on this whole trademark thing. What's going on with Yusuf?
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for the nice welcome. And maybe for those who wonder why I was so quick, it was in January in Buffalo. It was freezing cold, and I just wanted to get home. So, now let's get serious again. In fact, what was stunning for me about this event at the Olympics is maybe the first time that not the gold winner, but the silver medal winner got most of the publicity and maybe more of publicity than a lot of people who won gold medals or even more than one gold medal. In fact, what happened was that Yusuf, he was just doing his thing, shooting with normal glasses and having a very specific pose that you probably all have seen because you made it even to a lot of news shows. And what happened was, or maybe why it was so interesting, was the big discrepancy with all of his competitors. while they had very fancy stuff, very fancy equipment with glasses, look like Terminator, and really seemed very much like professional, or I would even say like semi-androids. He was just standing there like you would imagine from a James Bond movie in a very cool pose and is doing his thing. Maybe it also comes because he is not only a professional sports shooter, but also he is part of the police force, so he's really used to shoot. And probably he can't run around with the specific gear if he wants to shoot a gangster. So probably it's much more convenient to have that kind of pose when you want to shoot. But what happened was that this pose got so much of traction that it got viral nearly immediately on the internet. You get a lot of memes going around on like, don't be this guy, be this guy, or try to be as cool as Yusuf. And very quickly, this started also to be used on commercial aspects. So people wanted to be related to this coolness, to this at the same time simpleness, but cool, simple, and effective. Contrary to complicated and weird and maybe effective. And what happened was that probably it got a bit too much for Yusuf. Everybody is using his photo. In fact, some used his photo, others were just using his pose. And even during the Olympics, as you saw, a lot of other sports guys, when they went on the podium, they were just imitating his pose because it became so cool of doing this pose of him being the shooter. I don't think that the reason why he put up the trademark was against the sportsman, but probably seeing all of those commercial players starting to use this pose for their products, he probably came up with the idea, hey, why shouldn't I just protect this and also benefit out of that, out of this worldwide, how do you say, celebrity, that was it.
Yes.
Just to benefit out of this worldwide celebrity that he got, and to make sure that he will touch at least something if some companies are trying to make money out of that.
Yeah, and by the way, so some people were actually filing trademark applications with the pose and Yusuf. So they decided to file trademark application. Now, a couple things. He's Turkish, right? So so trademark protection is kind of like patent protection in that you have to get it in the nation where you're using your product and you want protection. So there is no worldwide trademark, right? So I just want to emphasize that because getting a trademark doesn't give you protection everywhere. But the real questions that I'm thinking about are, first, can Yusuf or anybody get trademark protection on a pose, right? Is it the kind of thing that's trademarkable? And then the next question is, can anybody else get a trademark with Yusuf in the pose? Or the third question is, if you don't want to use Yusuf in the pose, can you get a trademark with the silhouette of the pose? Or with somebody else? Like, can I get a trademark with Daniel doing the pose that Yusuf did? So it's really those three questions that we have to ask ourselves. And Ray, I'm sure you know this because you've been with me long enough, but in order to get a trademark, not only does it have to be both actually and inherently distinctive, right? Which means no one's already using it on your products and services or in your industry, but also it has to be applied to products and services. Trademarks are like, peanut butter and jelly. Even worse, peanut butter and jelly is, for me, integrated. They're one and the same. Some people don't like peanut butter and jelly. Some people want to put it with bananas or fluffernutter. But anyway, the point is they've got to be integrated in an unbreakable bond, products and services with trademarks. If you try to get a trademark in thin air with no product or service, you can't get it. You must have it connected to products and services. So if Yusuf says, I just want to get a trademark to keep other people from doing it, so I'm going to get a trademark on my pose. There's a pause, right? For what? What are your products and services? So if he doesn't want to get into the business of something where he's using it, like maybe a gun store or a shooting lessons or something, or anything, even a lawn service, it doesn't have to be related to his pose, he can't get one. Now, have you guys ever considered whether anyone else has tried to get a trademark on their pose or on their moves?
I tried years ago for my dance moves, but apparently John Travolta already had it. So,
but you did it so well, though. Like when I saw you do it, I thought, wow, you could teach John Travolta a few things.
He's got nothing on me, but
right. And I'm sure Daniel would do it even better. Well, you know, you guys might remember that in the early 1980s, Michael Jordan and Nike came together and built a sneaker brand, right? Well, they also created a trademark that they called Jumpman. And Jumpman is essentially, you know how Michael Jordan was really great at flying through the air as he's going to dunk the ball?
Yeah.
Well, he's got this one signature move, and they created a trademark which wasn't Michael in it. It was a silhouette, kind of. It was like white Michael. You know, the whole thing was just like a white image against a background. And that became their trademark. But even though it was Michael's signature move, they didn't get a trademark in a vacuum or in thin air. They got it in connection with sneakers and other merchandise, right? Now, you guys are both probably too young to remember that because, Ray, you're in like your early 30s and Daniel looks like he's about 31, 32. So
I wish.
So anyway, you might remember another guy named Usain Bolt. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
I think he won like, I don't know, 8 Olympic medals or something. I don't know. I'm probably overstating that, but he was really fast. And he created his own move. He called it the 2D world pose. Do you guys remember that pose?
No.
It was well, maybe it wasn't that memorable, but anyway, it was his victory pose, and he was successful in getting a trademark in connection with clothing and accessories, right? But again, it wasn't in thin air. So the question is, you know, when Yusuf applied, and I didn't see his application, Daniel. I don't know if you did, but
you weren't wrong. 8 gold medals.
8 gold medals. Okay, so
Usain,
he was really fast. I remember one Olympics where he was running in the 100-meter dash, and before the end, he actually looked at the guy next to him who was like way behind him. And I thought, wow, that's a fast guy. Now, mind you, the guy next to him was the second fastest in the world. And it's not like some guy out of high school or something. These guys are great runners, and he still just kind of looked at him casually. But anyway, so what do you think? Does Yusuf have any products? I mean, Daniel, do you know if he's got any products along with his trademark application?
I have no idea. I don't remember. I don't recall. I haven't read something about it.
Isn't that Usain Bolt?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I remember that.
He kneels down or he crouches down during it.
Yeah.
Something like that. Pretty cool.
I don't.
You don't know if he has products.
I don't recall if he said if he wants to put it in connection with products. And I'm also wondering, in fact, as you said, owning a trademark means that you have to use it. I think the question is, do you have to use it yourself, or is it enough if you license it to somebody using it?
You can't get a trademark unless you have a product or service it's connected to. So you can't get a Yusuf pose trademark generically for anything in the world and then license it out. But if you do have your line of clothing or your gun store or your lawn cutting service with the Yusuf pose, whatever that was, you know, the cool pose, you can then license that trademark out, but you need to get the underlying trademark. Now, by the way, I'm a U.S. lawyer, right? He's in Turkey. I have no idea what Turkish law is, but I'm guessing because the whole world is kind of coalescing around the same basic IP laws, it's probably very similar, right? So the next question, though, is, can anyone else get this trademark? So again, you need to have a trademark that's both actually and inherently distinctive, and you need to have a product or service that goes along with it. So let's start with having Yusuf in it. Can somebody get a trademark where Yusuf is coolly putting his hand in his pocket, you know, and he's aiming the gun for their own gun store? You know, what do you think? Can they do that? If no one else has applied yet, and they're the first ones to apply, it's actually distinctive, inherently distinctive, but not for a gun store. Let's say it's even more generic. Let's say it's for a lawn cutting service. Can somebody else use Yusuf in his pose as a logo for their lawn cutting service? What do you guys think?
Is he recognizable besides the pose?
Yes,
I mean, is it
yes,
just photo?
You can see him in the logo. You see it, you go, that's Yusuf. Not only from his pose, but from his face.
I mean, isn't there a right of the image issue then in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. We go outside of trademark law now because with respect to trademark law alone, I would say the answer is yes. You could take Yusuf in his pose and use it for your lawn cutting service as your logo if you ignore all other rules. But there's this rule about likeness, certainly in the US. In fact, they call it publicity rights. Now, I don't know. I'm going to test your age again. Have you ever heard of Bette Midler?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. When I was younger, I always thought she was the greatest singer, the greatest female vocalist of all time. I loved listening to Bette Midler. Well, somebody else loved listening to her as well, and that was an automotive company that wanted to use her voice on a commercial. And she said, absolutely not. That's not my thing. I don't want my name or my voice or anything or likeness connected to any products, right? So what they did is they went out and got somebody who sounded a lot like Bette Midler. And they had that person sing in the commercial. So Bette Midler sued them for taking her likeness, and she prevailed. So ignoring trademark law, you probably couldn't get away with that depending upon how much of a celebrity Yusuf is, because you're trying to trade on his likeness. If you use him as a trademark, because people might think Yusuf is connected to your product, right? And he doesn't want that. It's his choice whether he gets to do that. So if it were in the US, I'd say maybe you could get it on you could get a trademark under trademark law with a logo of Yusuf shooting his gun, but you'd then violate another law which is related to likeness. But what if we do this? What if we use Daniel? Daniel, good-looking guy, right? Very well known, certainly in the intellectual property industry. So what if we use Daniel in the Yusuf pose to be a logo for our products and services? And again, assume they're not descriptive.
This is a great idea.
I know. Because, who wouldn't want Daniel? Daniel, you could make a fortune in licensing revenues. But so the question is either Daniel or a silhouette. Let's just say it's not Daniel. It's not Yusuf. It's just a silhouette of the pose itself.
Yeah.
What do you think now? Can we do that? And let's say that it's a product that it works. It's like a lawn cutting service. It's not descriptive of like a gun store or anything like that.
I think if you ask me, I think you could. I think it kind of just depends on who got there first.
Right. Agreed. Assuming they got there first, just on using the silhouette or Daniel doing the pose, assuming that Daniel agrees to his likeness and all that. What do you think, Daniel?
I wonder if we speak about trademarks, don't you have trademarks by use and celebrity or general knowledge of people that they attribute this whatever design or graphic or what to a specific company, and the trademarks that are registered? So if everybody would imagine, or I immediately have the idea in his head that this has to be Yusuf because Yusuf did this pose, and somebody else is trying to use it who is not connected to Yusuf, that this would be a problem because the general knowledge is this, we would expect this to be Yusuf.
Yeah, in other words, trademark law is different than stealing the likeness, right? Again, with respect to trademark law, the questions are, is it actually distinctive? Is it inherently distinctive? Is it descriptive? As long as it's not descriptive, it's like, one of the higher level marks that are usable. It probably works, right? You could use a silhouette of that pose because it's about trademark law. But Daniel, you're right. You got to get into the question of likeness, right? Are we stealing likeness? Now, then it comes down to how popular is this? And by the way, let me just say, before I read the link that you sent this morning, and right now it's September 30th, long after the Olympics are done, I'd never even heard of Yusuf before. I never saw the pose before in this whole last few months. I've never seen it. So I would say it's not a likeness issue, because who even knows who this is? But what you're saying is it got, and I didn't watch the Olympics, by the way, but it got so popular that people were up on their podiums for like winning swimming or basketball doing the pose, right? So I guess it comes down in that case to how recognizable is this pose in connection with Yusuf, right? And that's what you're getting at, right, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, the idea would be if, let's say, we put up some sports t-shirt or sweater or whatever, you put the pose on it, and you ask the typical target group, and 80% will tell you, this is the guy from the shooting of the Olympics.
Right.
I think in this case, you have a real trouble, because then I don't think that you would be allowed to fight anything like that, because there is a set acceptance by the market already that this is Yusuf, and then he should, I would expect that he should be the only one to have the right to file a trademark on that.
Well, because of his likeness, and I'll bet you that would be proof at trial. That would probably be what his company came up with, or the defendant came up with, is stats on it. Hey, we went out and polled 1,000 people. We showed this image of the pose. Only 8 of them knew who it was. 8 out of 1,000. So that's not very recognizable. But what if 800 out of 1,000 knew? Yep. Now it goes more toward Yusuf. So I guess it would depend upon how big of a celebrity he is. And by the way, what about time, right? It's popular now, but what about 5 years from now? And no one knows who Yusuf is anymore. Memories fade, right? He's no longer popular. He hasn't leveraged this enough. Now it's a different story, because now people might not know the guy, and you do the same poll and no one knows who he is. So it probably is really ripe now. But here's the funny thing. Getting a trademark. So they said in the article that I read, they said, I just want to get it here. They said that they filed a trademark application because other people were trying to leverage his commercial, credibility, or not credibility, visibility, right?
Yeah.
So they filed trademark application. But here's the thing. Number one, he has to have products and services, which he might not have. But 2, he doesn't have to do that, because if the defense is likeness, it doesn't matter if he has a trademark application of his own or not. He can still oppose based upon the other non-trademark thing, right? So it's kind of, I don't know. And again, I'm not a Turkish trademark lawyer, but it seems to me that if you ignore likeness issues, he's got a problem. But when you throw likeness issues in, especially if he's as famous as Daniel says he is, then he's probably got a pretty good case against anybody who tries to get trademark protection, leveraging his likeness for their own commercial gain. What do you guys think?
I'm curious as to, so what if, and this is purely hypothetical, but what if there was a like an NRA target trainer, right? Like one of these people who goes out and they train people to shoot targets. And let's say she had a company where she was selling classes to become a better target shooter, and her logo was very similar to his pose, right? And
let's say it's the same pose. Let's say
it's exactly the same silhouette. What then? And but before the Olympics, right? So let's say this target trainer was already using this, and then all of a sudden he does the pose, Yusuf does the pose, and it becomes really famous, and then he gets a trademark and starts putting that on t-shirts. Does he have a claim against her? Does she have a claim against him?
Yeah, well, there's 2 things going on there. First question is, if you have the pose of the shooter, ignoring Yusuf for a moment, the question is it a descriptive trademark, right? I have a shooting pose and I'm selling shooting services. So in the US, there's like 4 or 5 basic categories of trademark significance. There's fanciful, which is like made up word, made up image. The next is arbitrary, which is a word that has nothing to do with the service, like Apple for computers. The next is suggestive, where the words kind of suggest it, but they don't describe what your product is. All 3 of those are cool. Then the next category is descriptive. You can't have a descriptive. You have to earn your rights to a descriptive mark, essentially, but let's not talk about that. In this case, and the fifth category is generic, which you can't get trademark protection for. But in this case, is it descriptive, right? Ignoring Yusuf, is it descriptive? And then when you go back and now Yusuf is popular and now I come up with it, ignoring likeness issues, is it now descriptive? Because now apparently everybody knows that Yusuf is a shooting guy and this is a shooting service. So maybe it's descriptive and they couldn't get trademark protection either. And neither could Yusuf, right? So even Yusuf, if he wants to have a shooting club and he has a shooter as the logo, it might be considered descriptive. Usually descriptiveness comes from words, right? And honestly, I've never really thought about descriptiveness with logos until this very moment, but that could be an issue, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, now I'm sure that since we have, what are we up to now? Like 800 million followers, Ray, or is it 1 billion yet?
There are currently only 300 million watching live. Which is interesting because we're not actually streaming. So I don't know how they got into my computer.
That's the fascinating part, is it's so popular that even though we're not streaming, people are still somehow watching, right?
Yeah. No, we get about a billion views per episode, but like a quarter of that is from India, about half in Europe, and then the rest in the US.
All right. So of the billion or so people, I'm sure we'll get a lot of interesting comments to tell me how I'm completely wrong about this, which would be fine. Oh, and by the way, we're not actually giving stats. We're just puffing, right? We're giving exaggerated claims. So we're not committing any kind of false advertising.
This is the greatest podcast about intellectual property on earth.
That's right. That's right. So
how could we not
consider
puff?
Puffery, right? Yeah, not false advertising. So anyway, I think we've probably covered this topic enough for people to start attacking us with their questions in the comment section.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for this magnificent, momentous event in the history of stuff you should know about IP with the great Daniel Ovadia as our guest.
Thank you. Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.